What's up, Foxton? Fox here. Today we're talking about the GTX 1050 in 2025. The GTX 1050 features 640 CUDA cores, a base clock of 1354 MHz, and a boost of 1455 with 2 GB of GDDR5 memory on a 128-bit bus. Now, I've been wanting to test this graphics card for a long time. I don't know why, but the GTX 1050 is something that I've always had an interest in, and I really want to get the 1050 Ti one day to test as well. But today we're going to be doing the base 1050, so let's hop into the benchmarks. Up first, we're going to do some modern games. Wu Chang at 720p with the ultra performance settings, the lowest settings, crashed, so we didn't get any good frame rates on there. It just didn't work at all. Obviously, 2 GB of VRAM in 2025 is very, very baseline, if not unacceptable, especially for modern AAA titles, but you'll see later on that there are some games that it still runs well on. Oblivion Remastered at 720p with FSR set to ultra performance at the lowest settings, around an average frame rate of 27, a 1% low of 8, and a 0.1% low of 4. So not quite 30, and also this game looks like mush. So if I were you and I had a 1050, I would play the original Oblivion instead of the remastered version because it'll probably end up looking sharper than Oblivion Remastered does at this ultra performance oatmeal looking preset. GTA 5 Enhanced at 1080p with the minimum settings, around an average frame rate of 73, a 1% low of 62, a 1% low of 62, and a 0.1% low of 58. So no problems at all playing GTA 5 Enhanced. You could probably crank the settings up just a little bit more, but this was hitting that VRAM cap. In fact, I had to turn off the VRAM warning, and I just went for the minimum settings at full fat 1080p, and it worked pretty dang well. Destiny 2, something to test out from an older, a time of yore when games were optimized for the GTX 1050 at 1080p with the lowest settings. We saw an average frame rate of 60 FPS most of the time in a Crucible match. Unfortunately, MSI Afterburner doesn't work with Destiny 2, so I was just eyeballing the stats. Counter-Strike 2 at 1080p with the low preset ran with an average frame rate of 175, a 1% low of 74, and a 0.1% low of 38. So this game did fluctuate quite a bit. On some parts of the map, we got up to 200 something, and on other parts, we got to the low hundreds. But it is at that point of playable where it doesn't really matter that there's a variance. If anything, I would say cap the frame rate at 120 if you want to have a consistent frame rate, and you'll be fine. So no problems whatsoever playing Counter-Strike 2 on this graphics card. Helldivers 2 at 1080p with the balanced FSR and the low preset ran with an average frame rate of 49, a 1% low of 36, and a 0.1% low of 6. So nothing to complain about here. It did run, and you could actually get higher frames if you set the FSR quality, but at that point, it starts looking like mush again. So I typically recommend just sticking to balanced, and you'll get a good, solid frame rate from a 1050, which I was actually really surprised by. Apex Legends at 1080p with the lowest settings needed no FSR with an average frame rate of 100 FPS, a 1% low of 62, and a 0.1% low of 45. We had no problems running this game at all. Marvel Rivals, surprisingly an esports title at 720p with the quality FSR preset and the lowest settings, only ran with an average frame rate of 36, a 1% low of 24, and a 0.1% low of 15. So this game is a lot more demanding than I thought it was initially. This game seemed like it was quite hard to run on this 1050. I was really surprised, considering I thought it would be optimized because it's an esports title, but I guess not. Tony Hawk 2's Pro Skater 3 and 4 at 1080p with the medium settings ran with an average frame rate of 57, a 1% low of 35, and a 0.1% low of 28. So this game really surprised me considering it just came out on Xbox Game Pass and it ran as well as it did at the medium settings on a GTX 1050. I was really surprised by this, but yeah, if you want to play Tony Hawk's Pro Skater, I know this is a nostalgia trip for a lot of people. You're going to have no problems on a GTX 1050. Call of Duty at 720p with the minimum preset ran with an average frame rate of 70 FPS, a 1% low of 41, and a 0.1% low of 5. There was no FSR needed to get 70 FPS. It ran pretty well, but the resolution is obviously a little crummy at this point. However, running a full fat 720p as opposed to FSR did help quite a bit in that regard. So the fact that we were able to hit 70 FPS was a good sign. So that was the GTX 1050, the little card that could. I think if you're still playing esports titles, then you'll be okay. If you still have a GTX 1050, there's no point to go out and buy one unless you're me, who's stupid. But other than that, the GTX 1050 surprised me in some games. I was really surprised that Marvel Rivals struggled to run as hard as it did when Tony Hawk's Pro Skater ran as well as it did. So I had no problems whatsoever. I would gladly keep this in my test bench, but the next video will be over the GTX 1080, so stay subscribed for that. Thank you so much for watching. Drop a like if you liked it. Do what you usually do, and as always, buy yourself something nice.